Welcome to the Product Quest podcast. Thanks for joining us on our journey to better understand innovation and product strategy. My name is Scott Burleson, and joining me as always, my co-hosts Jan Vermouth and Jonathan Edwards. Today we welcome our special guest, Dr. Min Basadur. It's very hard to introduce Dr. Basadur for the simple reason that we're talking about one of the legends in innovation. So let me hit the high points and just know this will be woefully incomplete. Min is Professor Emeritus at McMaster University and founder of Basadur Applied Creativity. He has 3 patents and a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. But Min is best known for his creativity system, complexity. In the 1970s, Min developed his method when building upon the work of colleague Sid Parnes. It's a system, a complete system, with all the essentials for defining problems, for generating solutions, and for selecting the best to act upon. It also considers the dynamics of different thinking styles, including an innovation profiler, which we are sure to discuss. Dr. Min Basadur, welcome to the Product Quest podcast.
Thanks, Scott. And I wanted a little slip of the tongue there. It's simplexity, not complexity. I think.
Simplexity. Did I say complexity?
Yeah. I think you might have, but it's anyway, it's a great way to introduce where the heck did simplexity come from. And it was simplex originally. It was simplex.
Right.
Yeah.
My notebook I have from 25 years ago. That's what it says. Yeah. Simplex on the front. Yeah.
Simplex. Yeah. We might have left it as simplex, but I'll cover that as well. I got a license plate on one of my cars that says simplexity. It's simplexity. And it occurred when I was having a conversation with Craig Vogel at University of Cincinnati. He's a what do they call it? The people who design stuff. And we were talking about. He was talking about the number of people who tend to pretend they know a lot about innovation, and they will get a lot of money for delivering speeches. And he said it's a real problem of getting people to understand there's more than just sitting and listening to a lecture. And I said, Craig, the problem is that if you say you do one thing, like product development, they'll say, sorry, we wanted something on manufacturing. If you say that, they'll say we want something else. So we have trouble kind of explaining to people that all we do is solve problems. We help people solve problems. It doesn't matter what they are. And I said, a colleague and I were saying, well, how do we tell people what we do? And we thought about it. He said, all we do is take complex problems, no matter what they are, and we try to make them simple. That's what we try to do. And Craig said, well, then what you do is called simplexity. That's where it came from. So complexity down to simplexity. So I beefed it up to simplexity. I still have quite a few people from a long time ago still with it who are doing simplex. They like simplex, and I'm thinking maybe we should have left it that way. But where the name came from was when I, my background was basically engineering physics at the University of Toronto. And I took engineering physics because I didn't know what to do. I needed to get a good job, and it was only going to be 4 years you could get a job. And we didn't have much money in the family, and medicine was going to be at least 6+, and so was law up here, 6+. But engineering was only 4, so I thought, okay, I don't know what to do, but I'll take engineering, I guess. And then I asked the magic question, which is, which engineering? What's the hardest engineering course there is? And everybody said, engineering physics is so hard, don't do it, because you'll be up against the smartest people in the world who come to this course. So I thought, well, if it's hard, it must be good. Kind of cod liver oil, it's got to be good for you. It tastes bad. And the second thing was, I really wasn't much of an engineer, so it had the least amount of practicality. And so I took the darn thing. So the very first day I'm in class, there were 167 people in the room. in this big amphitheater, and a guy with a tie comes in and says, "That's the professor." And he said, "Okay, I want you to look to the left and look to the right, and one of you three is not going to be here next year." What a way to start. So I looked at him, I said, that's going to be him. So now it's competition. We start running to be first in line for class and stuff like that. Well, at the end of the first year, we're down to 103. And now everybody said the second year was the real hard year. And I said, oh my goodness. At the end of the second year, we're at 67 people in this class. And what a way to run education. So I'm learning, well, knowing it, I'm learning a lot about team dynamics and everything else. And so now they let you live. And I got used to not learning much other than to solve complicated one-answer problems, equations one after another. And there were people in the room who were good at this, and I wasn't bad, but I wasn't good. So I ended up squeaking through and ending up with a bit of a chemical, what do you call it, a specialty. The lucky thing was there were a lot of people looking for engineers, and you could show up and you could get a lot of interviews. So I ended up with, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I end up with, that was Toronto. And nearby Toronto, there's a city called Hamilton. And in Hamilton, there was a company called Procter & Gamble. Now, I knew Procter & Gamble. I used Crest toothpaste and Ivory. I knew all that stuff. And, well, they're nice people. They're really nice people. And they invited me out. And then they said, you've got a choice. You can go to that side of the street. That's where we have manufacturing. On this side of the street, there's something called research and development. I had never heard of research and development, so I took it. And so I took it and I liked it. And so when people ask me, how did you get to what you're doing, what I did was I didn't know what I was doing. And Woody Allen one time said something very profound. 80% of anything is just showing up. So I show up, I go here, go there. Well, I end up in Hamilton, and I end up doing a pretty good job. What can go wrong if you're making soap and stuff like that? It's not that technical, I don't think. Well, it turns out that I was good at two things. I could do the regular stuff, but I also was good at making things happen. I had a way of involving people, making things happen from one end to the other, where a lot of my colleagues were good at one thing or another thing. They were either this or this. And so I ended up looking pretty good. And so the company said, how would you like to go down to Cincinnati? That's our headquarters. And don't worry, you'll be coming back. Okay, if I'm coming back, why wouldn't I go? So they put me into a brand new division called the Industrial Division. Now, P&G is not industrial. It makes things for supermarkets. But they said there might be a way that we can invade the industrial market and all kinds of new products, drums and things like that. And I went down as kind of a charter member. And they had some people there who were kind of long in the tooth, and they were selling scrap soap and that, but no, we're going to get really, really good. So I went down there and thinking I'm coming back in a couple of years. Things went very, very well. We were very unstructured, unlike Procter & Gamble, very unstructured, yet we had a sales department, and there was me, and all we did was make them up. They said, we need this. I would figure it out. We need that. And I got to be very good at, as they say, picking them up and laying them down. I could generate a lot of stuff. And at the same time, it became obvious that what I was good at was getting things done. And I was very good at getting people together, making things happen. And I was a process person. I began to understand process. And then I began to get requests from other parts of the company. Could you help us do this in such and such a plant? Could you help us do this? And all of a sudden, a central group downtown called Management Systems Division kind of recognized what I was doing. And they were in charge of industrial engineering for all of the plants. which is making change. But they said, this guy knows how to make change in other places, not just manufacturing, marketing, sales, everywhere. So they took me downtown, and what had happened was I'd had some very big successes in my consulting. And one of the big successes, which we're going to talk about later on, was the discovery of the answer to Irish Spring. And I had the vice president of R&D for the whole company who heard about our success with coming up with this great solution to that problem. And he sent, well, I'll cover that a little later on. But what happened was he said, could we find a way to make our engineers much more conceptual, much more conceptual. I didn't know what it meant exactly, but boy, did I enrolled at the University of Cincinnati, and I was taking courses at the PhD level, and all of a sudden I heard manna from heaven. Here's my dissertation topic right here. So I went to the University of Cincinnati at nighttime in the management department, and I did a dissertation inside the company with all the resources behind me on showing that you can get people to think more conceptually. I proved it analytically, and the darn thing won a big award, the best dissertation of that year by the American Psychological Association. And so all of a sudden, here I am. I've spent 7 years taking courses and getting ready, and also doing my work. I had a laboratory in front of it, a laboratory right here that I was working with real people, real problems. And along comes a university. By the way, I had decided to stay. After a couple of years, things were going so well, I reluctantly said, I will stay in Cincinnati and I will sell my house back in Canada and we will stay here. That was a big deal. That was a real big deal. And so I stayed, and the opportunities came. And McMaster came along in Hamilton, Ontario. They're a very research-intensive university. And they said, we would like you to come back to Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. We're starting up courses in organizational behavior. You've got a PhD and you're Canadian, so why don't you come back? Well, that was hard. That was the real big difficulty of leaving a wonderful place called Procter & Gamble and going back. But I thought, I talked to my dissertation advisor, George Grain, and he said, if you stay at Procter & Gamble, you're going to be kind of small potatoes. There's a whole world out there that needs you. And he said, if you stay at Procter & Gamble, you can pretty well guess what you'll be doing for the next 25 years. But if you go to McMaster, you will have a new future. I memorized those words. You will have a new future. Of course, it's going to be hard. Who gets a chance to have a new future at that age? And it's hard. It's going to be hard. Nothing's easy. So I did. So now here's where Simplex comes in. When I joined P&G, I said, okay, what am I going to do? There's two things. There's two separate things here. There are a lot of people in innovation who do consulting. That's what they do. They do consulting. There are other people who are academics, and they don't do any consulting. They just do theory. And I want to do both. I don't want to be knocking on doors, selling stuff. I want them to come to an expert who say, could you help us? And I'd say, gee, I'd like to help you. So I formed what's called the Center for Research in Applied Creativity. And the word applied was key, because creativity at that time was thought of fun and games. We just go throw stuff at each other and have a good time. It's real. So it's applied, and I want to do research. And that's going to be my life. So that started it. And for that next many years, I've been running a dual career. My research is done while I'm consulting. I do the two things at the same time because I have real people that I can work with. And I thought I got to give myself a name, a brand. And I brainstormed all the things that I was trying to teach people. And one word stood out, was simple. My job was to get people to think simple. I found that all kinds of people could not solve problems because they use fancy words and they could never really get down to what are we really talking about. And I found that the people really liked it when I got them to say, what do you really mean by that? What do you mean by that? So the idea was simple. And who are the most creative people in the world? There are kids. And what do? Think simple. So the whole thing became, I put an X on it, and it's called Simplex. That's exactly where it came from. And so that became the brand. And from then on, I have been running into people like yourself who like what I'm doing, and we get together, we talk, and basically what I've done is, I guess the word is enable. I've been enabling people all over the place to start up their own practices. If they're inside companies, to catalyze problem solving inside the companies, and we have four levels of training that we do. One is base level one, where we teach people, get people to understand how they can learn how to be more creative, the process. Second level is facilitation. We can facilitate small groups of people to solve problems. Third level is integration. I know this stuff so well, I can integrate it and catalyze problem solving all over the company, 24/7, 365. And finally, train the trainer, where I'm so smart at this, I love it so much that I can teach other people to do level one. I can teach them how to teach others. So those developed and ended up with several major successes with companies, and developed an awful lot of people inside companies who would take over for me inside, and many people started their own consulting. So that's basically, if you want to talk about the roots of the Simplex process, that's how it happened. And none of this could be predicted. I just did one thing after another. And there were certain times when I had to make some. When I left P&G, all of a sudden there was a flurry of companies who had heard about me and wanted me to help them. And Ford Motor Company, Frito-Lay, and they all were looking for ways to engage people and go beyond just doing little process improvements, but engage people in doing big stuff, big changes. And that was exciting. That was really exciting for me, to the point that how in the world do you keep yourself in a job at McMaster University doing research, and you got all this stuff coming at you? So I began to develop associates who could help me with the stuff that we were doing. So now we have a network of people pretty much around the world, of people who are pretty good at what they do and make a living at what they do. And so that's basically what we ended up calling it, what do we call it? Basadur Applied Innovation. It was Basadur Applied Creativity, but since innovation, see, to me, applied creativity, innovation are the same thing. So now innovation is a more popular thing, and maybe I was 30 years ahead of my time, but now it's Basadur Applied Innovation. So anyway, that's how I got started, where it came from. I've got a little I've got a little list of things you said we could talk about, or you could just lead me into other things.
Yeah, well, I've got a few questions. First of all,
yeah, me too.
I just think that's an amazing story. A few themes I'm just looking at. Some of your motivations for what your selection was often, what's the most difficult or most challenging? You looked at those, just drew you in. It's funny. That's your logic for your major is virtually the same as mine. I majored in electrical engineering. It was like I could get a job right away. And as crazy as it sounds, it's like, well, it's something really hard, so it must be valuable. I mean, and I seem to have some math ability. That doesn't sound like good logic. That was my thinking. And when you were describing selecting your major, it was like, wow, That reminds
Yeah.
me.
By the way, it was exactly the same for me too. And I actually studied physics like you. And in addition, I don't know if this is a physics thing, because they told us exactly the same thing. Look at your left and at your right. I don't remember now if it was two of them or one of them will stay. So exactly the same thing for me.
They told me that too.
Yeah.
At NC State, they said the engineering dean said the exact same thing. Must be universal truth.
Yeah, when you're in high school, you don't really know what you're doing, and so that was I grasped at that straw. If it's got to be hard, it's got to be good. There was I had nothing else to guide me, so you just go do it.
One of the big things that really jumps out at me is when you I'm not going to have your exact wording, but right, but something you said in the innovation space or consulting space, you often use technical language, things that makes things more complicated. And I think I see that even today, and which is interesting, but you saw that as a challenge, where this complexity didn't provide a lot of value. So this might seem, well, I'm just sort of curious. How would you define? So everything is about getting things simpler. How do you define simple? What makes something simpler? What's the value of that?
Well, the saying is, you cannot help somebody solve a problem if you're not sure what they're talking about. That's absolutely critical. In the work that we do, two basic skills are divergence, where we generate options of all kinds, facts, and convergence, and we go 50-50. And in convergence, we have a process called telescoping, which I have patented. And telescoping is, this is where it happened. I was one of my really good colleagues, Gwen Speranzini. I taught her, and she went out on her own, and she became a key person, upper management with Nabisco, Canada. And she was bringing in simplicity thinking all over the company, including the top people. So she created an event where there would be about 30 people, and we'd split them up to about 5 groups, and I'd be facilitating one group, and she'd be another, and there'd be another. So we're going through, and we're together. We're doing fact finding. So we each got a problem. We're doing fact finding, and then we do a lot of divergent fact finding all over the place. Now it's time to converge. So I'm getting ready to get my group to converge, and I look over there, and Gwen. They've already gone. They've moved on. Wait a minute. So Gwen says, well, we picked our best ones. We moved on. I said, whoa. So Gwen, who's really good, even I have not got across to her how important converging well is. So I invented something on the spot. I said, could everybody stop? Come on in here. I want to show you converging is like a telescope. And it's got 3 parts to it. First thing, we have 30, 40, 50 facts or ideas up on a list. And the first thing we do is everybody gets 1 or 2 or 3 converging dots, and they make a choice of what they think are the most important ones. Okay, yeah. So that brings it down to about 12. And then what we do is we don't do any judging. We clarify to understand. That's all we do. What each person has to do is say, I picked this one, and why I picked it is, and what I meant by it is. Who else picked it? Everybody has to explain why they picked it. And now we have a good conversation of what did you really mean by that? And often it meant 2 or 3 different things to different people. But during that session, all we do is understand, and use little words. And then we go to the third stage, which is we pick the vital few. But now we absolutely understand them. Everybody has been heard. Everybody has been. We don't do any voting. We don't vote on anything. And then we finally agree on what the top 3 are. in our language exactly what we mean. We exactly know what it is. And then we can go on to the next step, which we call problem definition. But it happened to be, and it was really instructive to me that someone that I had taught so well and gone on their own, I still hadn't gone converging, really understood. So that's where complexity comes in. And you have to, in a group, you have to get to the point where you know, and it's not okay to say, oh, we all know what they mean. That's what I ended up. Oh, we all know what, wait a second. And that's a big mistake if they're in such a hurry to solve the problem. They can't take the time to understand. And you build ownership. Now, even if one of my dots wasn't picked, at least they listened to me and I got it. And I agreed that this is the best we can go. So developing ownership is critical. And so in the process, there's a process, but it has, there's a process. We use 8-step process, but it's got diverging and converging every single step. And when you've got a team operating, we don't move ahead. It's a house of cards. You can't just say, well, oh, by the way, the classic definition of the word consensus doesn't work. In that classic definition, I don't like it, but I can live with it. It's got to be agreement. You don't live with it. You agree with it. You believe it's really important, and you move ahead. Absolutely vital. Otherwise, you didn't do enough of a job on discussing what the things mean. And it's a group decision. But also, the other when finally you have to pick between one or two, you've got to have an owner. That's another thing. You've got to have an owner. That's another reason why design thinking is getting a bad rap. There's no ownership. Nobody owns the problem. They're just in there helping. So you need an owner. Yeah, you might have 2 or 3. And also, by the time you involve everybody's a part owner. But if you're down to choosing between 1 or 2 things, the owner has to say. So that's the one I like. And the whole session is about pleasing the owner. That's all we're trying to do. We're trying to please the owner. And the owner, and we're hoping to motivate the owner that he's getting excited and he's actually going to do something, because the latter part of the process has to do with planning and implementation. So I don't know whether I explained that. Yeah, now I had a really high, out in California, Bakersfield, there was a company of a really smart, it was an oil company, and they were having, price of oil was way down. It was like $6 a barrel. And these people had to take oil fields, which had already been plumbed, and there's nothing much left. They had to bring them up and able to make a profit. So I got with the really smart people, and they were using words that I didn't understand exactly. And that's a real, if I don't understand it, I don't think they do either. So they would say something. I said, does that mean look under the rock? Yeah, that's what it means. We use look under the rock as opposed to whatever thing that they said. So we use words like that, and we got somewhere. The company's still in business, and so those are examples. Look under the rock. I'll never forget that. Does that mean look under the rock? Yeah. So
can I just say I absolutely love this. I don't know where this is from, but I have this deep aversion against jargon. Like, and I think you pointed it out so well. I think it's really so often it's used to hide that you don't have a clue. You can hide so much behind jargon, behind I don't know what rhetoric tricks and so on. And I loved it that one of the bigger things that you do is, can you just speak in simple terms so everybody and people think that is easy, but it's quite the opposite, I assume. Like really getting to a simple description of a problem is really, really hard.
Yes, very hard. I really understand what you said better now because of the pandemic. Up until the pandemic, I was doing lots of work, consulting, teaching, and I was just talking to people. I didn't have to really worry about exactly what I was saying because I could see them nodding their heads and understanding. Yeah. But when the pandemic hit, we had to go digital. We had to start making our teaching. And now you had to really be careful about what you're saying. because it's going to be digitized. It's going to be voiceover. It's got to be exact. And so I found that I was learning a lot about what I was really trying to say and saying it nice, simple language. I had to talk it. And that got me to really do a better job because I know exactly what I was trying to say, not sort of. And it's very big. I think they use the word explicit or something like that, tacit versus explicit. And now, right now, we're producing quite a few virtual productions, and we're still doing it. And we always make ourselves do a script. The script has to be very precise. We know what we're talking about, and then we can use the voiceover and that kind of thing. So it's amazing how that's so important to be. How easy it is to not take the effort to be exact, and how easy it is to just say, "Let's get on with it. You just go." So that was one of the things. Oh, we all know what we mean. Oh, we all know what we mean, and they wanna go.
Yeah.
One of the big themes that jumps out at me just listening is the importance of going from complicated to simple is just, well, you mentioned that when somebody votes, that okay, they vote, then they explain why they voted that way, or they re-explain it. And it occurred to me, like we're all in our own brains, we're all in our own heads, we have these ideas, we have logic that is sort of maybe good, may not be as good, but when we have to communicate it, it forces us to think, first of all, to clarify I might not even be clear on my thinking. I have to clarify that myself to communicate it to you. And then for you to repeat it back to me, what we're doing, we're using this crude instrument of words that, where we have these thoughts, it goes through words, we have to hear them, we have to, they're in our brain, they have to be reprocessed in another brain. We've got multiple people around. It's like it's all about communicating, like getting whatever the root of the issue is. And then if I can paraphrase a little bit, I think the problem with complexity is it's hiding. It creates an illusion that we're define the problem the same. It's hiding behind these things, and we say, hey, just look under the rock. And another thing, though, is it's more than that. About gaining agreement, I really like what you said, like consensus isn't good enough. And if I believe you that you're saying, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's that we don't want to leave anybody behind where I don't feel hurt. I don't think it's the right idea, but I'll go along with it. It's like we want everybody to understand it as well as they can. And by virtue of that knowledge, that our goal is that we all subscribe to the same reasoning and logic in that for our buy-in for whatever our course of action is. That's
exactly it. And the one technique we use is called paraphrasing. Is so you say something. If I say, let me tell you what I think you said, and I say it to you. Now I'm showing you that I really respect what you said. I want to hear, and you come back. You say, yeah, that's it, or you say not exactly, and then you repeat it, and we got it nailed down. We nailed it down. So that's a very good technique for assuring that you're getting that you heard right. But also you're valuing this person's contribution, and he feels valued in what you're doing. And so you're building up the possibility that you're actually going to implement something when you're finished, because everybody is feeling ownership for what you're doing. So that's a really good technique. There's a lot of other techniques we use for communication. Is that's a big word, but it really means for us it's making sure that everybody knows the same thing. They know the same words. They use the same words. The English language, any language, of course, it's the name of the game. One course I took when I was at Cincinnati, I had some very good university professors on my team. And one of them said, you ought to take a course in cognitive psychology. They're all trying to figure out what is it that I do. I was doing social psychology and organizational behavior. And I said, okay. So I had never had a course in psychology in my life. So now I go into this. The room is it's an 800 level class. Everybody in there is getting a PhD in cognitive psychology, and I'm just one guy, and I know nothing. So now what happens is I try to learn, and to read one sentence takes me a half an hour. To read a paragraph takes me 2 hours because they're using these big words, which everybody knows what they mean, and I don't know what they mean. So I start sweating it, and I went to the professor, and I said, "Geez," he says, "I can't help you. I know you got to write the exam like everybody else." So I just used my magic markers, etc. Going, one book was by a guy named Nissert, who was the king of all people in cognitive psychology, and another one was called. It was by the guy who does. Is it Myron Lansky? He's a huge. He's a huge. It was called psychocybernetics, and the psychology of learning. Psychology of learning, or so the study was how we think is how we speak, and he connected the two things. And I went over those books. That one was easier, and I ended up writing the exam, and I was second in the class, or highest mark in the class, because I taught myself to use language that I understood. But this book, psycholinguistics, it was psycholinguistics. So the whole thing is that we speak the way we think. And if it comes out fuzzy out of your head, it's going to come out fuzzy. And the idea was it's all about meaning. The big word was over and over again, meaning, meaning, meaning. What you're communicating is meaning, not words, it's meaning. And if you get that meaning right, then you're, and it comes out of the brain. So that was something that I've treasured. I'm really glad I took that class, even though I thought I had no chance of even passing it. But I did learn that concept that when we're speaking, we're conveying meaning. And if you don't get the meaning right, you're in big trouble. And the only way we have is by talking. That's how we speak. So that's our method of conveying meaning and agreeing on meaning.
That is, I mean, I have to jump in here. I mean, for me, this feels like, so I have a background. I'm not an engineer. I'm not studying physics. I studied philosophy. And I feel like philosophers are trying to do nothing else but exactly this. Just trying, okay, there are, I can say, so there is at least half of them are trying to hide behind complexity. The other half is really trying to put stuff really in simple terms and try to make it as explicit as they can. And I think it's maybe it's more of an ideal to strive towards. Like probably how you're going to ever get there of having a completely clear sentence. I don't know if it really exists, but it's the struggle is exactly this. I mean, philosophy is nothing else but asking, what do you mean when you say, and then put in whatever you want. And now trying to make sense of it. And it's extremely hard, and you can have discussions for 2,000 years and not come to a conclusion.
So interesting. I've never took a course in philosophy. And one day it came to me, somebody said, what you're doing is philosophy. And I said, yeah, that's exactly. I know the connection. That's the connection. And that helped me discover what I meant by process. Basically, there's process and content, and if you're going to be good at helping people, you have to distinguish between the two. You have to concentrate on the process, leave the content for the other person. So, and unfortunately, leaders don't understand this, and they get it all mixed up, and they try to push their own thinking through. So, the way it was described to me was, okay, you're sitting in front of a tree. And you see the tree. That's content. Now you step back and you see yourself looking at the tree. So that's process. You are watching yourself, and then you step back and you see yourself, seeing the tree. So the thing becomes to be able to separate process from content. And to be a good facilitator or teacher, you have to do the two things. And you have to be able to separate the two. So if you're helping a group of people, They have the content. They are the experts. They know what they're doing. You're the facilitator, taking them through a process that helps them work their way through to a problem, and that's a huge leadership principle. What I do could be called leadership. And by the way, Scott, in your book, you go over that over and over again, where you say, "Here's what we say," then you shorten it. Here's what we and you shorten it, and you continually get people to speak in simple terms all the way through, and it becomes shorter and shorter and more on the money. So it's like you'd say, it's a nice day outside. Maybe it is, maybe, but if I say Min thinks it's a nice day outside, that's much more precise. So we oftentimes we say, we'll just say Charlie says that's too many. We don't argue if Charlie is right or wrong. We just put it down. Charlie did this. Move on to the next. Move on to the next. So we separate spending time on content. Like one of my favorite people is Michael Curtin, who helped me a lot. He's the one who invented KAI, that AI inventory. When I went to spend time with him in England, he helped me a lot create my profile because he knew the mathematics so well. But he didn't understand process. He just didn't understand. He thought he did. So we had a session where we started with the problem, and somebody said we started fact finding, and somebody said something, and Michael said, "Yeah, I don't agree with that fact. I don't think it's a fact." So we're going to spend 15, 20 minutes arguing about whether it's a fact or not, but we're trying to diverge and gather information. But so we don't stop, and we just keep on going. Put it down. You don't like that? Say, Min said it. So-and-so said it. Move on. It may not be important whatsoever, but there's some people think we have to go through and analytically, because they already believe they know what the problem is. They're just going to reduce it down, etc. Well, the creative process is no, we just start with something and now we explode it up and come down, up and down. And maybe, by the way, that's one of the problems with design thinking that I'm learning, is that very often people solve the original problem and they work it down and work it down, and they end up with a small improvement on something. Where the secret of design thinking is starting with something and coming up with reframing it into a much broader, bigger possibility, and that's where the money really comes in. So most people do not understand problem definition. They don't understand it. They think they do, but they don't. And that's where I think most of the world does not. And that's the substance of our process. And that's why it's not easy to do. Defining the problem is not easy to do and needs an open mind. So I'm hoping that we may be on the cusp of maybe breakthrough on this. So by the way, I made a note to myself. There are two books that I have coming out as we speak. One is called Scatterbrains, which talks about how having people with very different thinking styles can help a lot in doing a problem. And the other one's called Think Better. Larry Crace and I are putting Think Better together, which is simply to get people to understand a little about, think about how you think, make it really, really simple. So that's coming out as well. And I'm working hard to get these things over the goal line right now.
Looking forward to
it. And so I said, make sure you mention Scatterbrains and Think Better. And that brings us to the profile. Scott, back to you again. I've been doing a lot of talking.
I actually had a question. We've touched upon the notion of problems. You just talked about it now, and previously in the discussion, we discussed the notions of complicated, simple, and I have two kind of related questions. The first is then, so how can we define a problem from your perspective? And would you differentiate the notion of complicated, complex problems?
Yeah. Um, Basically, we think the world is problem solving. That's what we do every day. You wake up in the morning, you solve the problem of how to get out of bed. All we do is problem solving, all the time. And some problems are very big, and but you never know which level of a problem you're working with. And I'll do the Irish. I think it's time to do the. We have something called the why would stopping analysis, which is part of challenge mapping. And at Procter and Gamble, when I was doing my job there, and a product called Irish Spring, a soap bar, which almost everybody knows, came out on the market, and immediately was a huge hit. But it was by Colgate, not by us. And it was a novel idea. It was a green stripe. It was striped. There were green and white stripes. And there's a guy on the commercial with a knife stroking the bar so you could see the stripes. Then they showed you a commercial where there was a guy in the middle of a meadow in Ireland. Everything was green. He's taking a shower and everything is refreshment. There's dew on the grass. There's a mountain and a stream. And it's a lovely situation. And the idea becomes, if you buy this bar with the green stripes, you're going to feel more refreshed. This bar takes off like a rocket, and P&G has been scooped, a very conservative company. So what they do is, like everybody does, they form a team. And they put the team aside and say, go solve this problem. Okay, so now I get a call from the team about 6 months later, maybe not 6 months, I don't know. And they said, I'm the leader of the team and we got a big problem. We're losers. We are not producing, and we have made, and everybody wants to quit. We have made 6 outstanding green stripe bars. And every one we do a blind test with them, and we come out equal. That's not good enough, because at our company, if you're second, you got to be better, not equal. So we're really stuck. And you're doing this creativity stuff, and maybe you could help us. I said, oh, let's give it a try. So we got the group together, and we started with what they were working was, how might we make a better green stripe bar? This is what we're doing, and they can't figure out how to do it. So we start with that. Everything is, by the way, every problem stated is how might we. It's very positive, and it's possibility. How might we make better green stripe bars? So we started with that in the morning. And I said, I'd like us to use the why would stopping analysis. And so I said, okay, I'm the process guy. You're the content guys. Why might we want to create a better green stripe bar? And somebody said right after that, we have lost market share. I said, good, let's turn that into another challenge. It turned out to be, how might we regain market share? So now we got 2. Regain market share is quite broad, and how might we get a better green stripe bar is narrower. So the way the process works, we continue diverge, and my job is to say, good stuff. Why else might we want to make a better green stripe bar? And nobody could think of anything. They just couldn't. And I said, okay, let me try something. I said, let's pretend that I'm not us. I'm a consumer. So from a consumer's point of view, why might we want to make a better green stripe bar? Somebody said, finally, I'd like to feel more refreshed. So that turned out, how might we make consumers feel more refreshed? So now we had 3 of them. The broadest at the top, the narrowest, and this one in the middle. How do we help people feel more refreshed at a bar? Well, what we did was what you do in challenge, you keep on asking why else was. We had a collage about 50 different how might we statements, and when it came time to pick, the one they picked was the one in the middle. How might we make a more refreshing bar? Now, if you ever want to hear an aha, there was the enormous aha. It was like getting out of the box. They were excited, And that got them out of the box that they'd been in. So in the afternoon, we went to solutions. We came up with about 300 ideas how to make a bar a more refreshing bar. When we converged, two that they picked was somebody said, when I think of refreshment, I go to the seacoast. Somebody else said, I like to go to the beach, sitting on the white sand and the blue sky, etc. And that out came a bar called Coast, Coast. And the image was blue and white swirly, sitting on the beach, feeling more refreshed. That bar finally beat Irish Spring in a blind test, finally, and they were given the rights to go ahead and market it. So that's to me, that's problem definition. That's the essence of problem definition. And you got to speak clearly. And we ask the question, why to go up? And we ask the question, what's stopping you to go down? Because often you got to go down. What's stopping me is ... something very exact. At the end, you finish diverging together. Now the team can pick the one or two or three which are the most critical and go ahead. So that's what we mean by problem definition. And any problem that you pick, we call it fuzzy situation. So if you say, I don't know how to get my son through college, that's a fuzzy situation. Is that a good? That's the problem you really want to solve? Yes, now you got ownership. Now that's a starting point. And now, how might I get? Now we do fact finding, diverge, converge, and then we generate a lot of how might we statements on step 3. Step 3 is problem. Step 1 is found a fuzzy situation. Step 2 is called fact finding, and fact finding is it's not reductive. It doesn't go downwards. It goes up. We ask questions like, what do you know or think you know about this problem? What don't you know but wish you knew? Why is this such a big problem? What have you thought of or tried already? If this problem were resolved, what actually would you have that you don't have now? And are you assuming anything that you don't have to assume? Divergent. Now we start picking, and the few that we pick, they trigger the problem definition. Now they trigger the problem definition. And now you start creating challenges, how might we? And then you pick. But what you've done is you've done a huge job on defining the problem. And almost always it turns out to be very, very different from the one you started with, which is a great one to start with. And there might be 2 or 3. It's like a log jam. What you end up with when you do the problem definition, you end up with a log jam. And when you try to destroy a log jam, you always pick the one log that you think will break it open the most, and that's what we do. What's the log in there you're going to pick out, and not the biggest or the smallest. What's the log, and you pull that one. That becomes your how might I that you go on to solve. Now, so in our process, the first 3 steps have nothing to do with solutions. They only have to do with problem definition. The 4th step is coming up with ideas, and they're much easier. And the 5th step is evaluate the ideas. And the 6th step is plan. Have you ever gone to a meeting we go to another meeting? Never leave a meeting without a plan for what we're going to do next. Critical. So 6th step is a plan for how we're going to implement that solution. And then selling. You always have to gain acceptance. And then action is the last one. And action is a step. We don't take it for granted. If you don't do step 8, you didn't do anything. You've got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. So for us, that's the real name of the game is problem definition. And Einstein once said, if I had an hour to save the world, I'd spend 55 minutes defining it. That's exactly what it means. And once you've defined it, often the solution pops up. It almost becomes evident as what the idea is. But most people do not understand this. It's a plague. Like engineering schools, all they do is teach certain solutions. You do this, you do this, you do this, and most of those solutions will just fit. There'll be all kinds of problems. Those solutions don't fit. And when we get people doing by the way, business schools are even worse at this. They teach them how to analyze a case, and they get the right answer to the case. But in the real world, nobody gives you cases. You have things you never dreamed about. And so this is we don't know how. We it's hard to teach this when the teachers can't even teach this. So it's the ability to say, I don't know. The big ability to say, I don't know. So if people will come to us and say, I need a whole lot more of da da da, can you help me? I say, I don't know. We have a process that might find out what you're really after, and we might be able to help you. And that's a big thing about our process is you got to be able to say you don't know if you can help. Like, yeah, oh, we got a problem. Well, I could do team building. I could do high performance systems. I could do this. I could do that. Every one of those is a solution. The reason my stuff works, they say, I don't know. And if we could sit down, we could define the problem you're trying to solve, and maybe we could pick a solution. And that is enormous. And I've been trained that way really heavily in the ability to say, I don't know. And I worked, one of my best colleagues was Sid Parnes at the Creative Education Foundation that Alex Osborne started about. And the most people go there and they are looking for deferring judgment and looking for good solutions, whatever. But what Sid and I understood was the power of asking the right question, the problem definition. And that's when I went back to Procter & Gamble. I said, I had so many smart people, PhDs in chemistry and whatever, who would try to solve a problem by coming up with different solutions. And what they didn't know, and I found out, here I am, I got a bachelor's degree in engineering physics, and I'm trying to help these people. I said, just to get them to say, well, let's look at what this problem might be, and working on the problem definition, how to break it down. They would think it was, I was so boosted my confidence that I was able to help these smart people by just getting them to really agree on what the problem was before they went. And that's what really made it work for me.
Man, I want to, when you were, you asked some questions a minute ago, like I believe it's part of the divergent exercise. I think
Yeah.
and I wonder if you could repeat those. That one of them was something like, what might you be assuming that you don't need to? But it sounded like there were like 3 or 4 key questions in that divergent. I wonder if
I'll go. Yeah, I'll do them again. The first one is, what do you know or think you know about this fuzzy situation? You either know it or you think you know it. Put it down. Second, what do you not know but wish you knew? So that's a big one. What don't you know but you wish you knew? See, we're opening up. Third one is, why is this a problem for you? Why can't you make it go away? Very, very specific. Tell me exactly, and we take whatever you say. And of course, if you have a group, they help each other think of things. They come up with things. Number 4, what have you already thought or tried? Like you've probably had this on your mind a lot of times, but what have you already thought of or tried? And out comes more. And for a team, let's get on the same database. Let's get to where we are right now. And then this is maybe the top one. If this problem were resolved, what would you have that you do not have now? What is it? Look to the future. Say 1 year from now, you're so happy because this problem got solved. What is it you got? Do you have more money in your pocket? Do you have a better relationship with somebody? Exactly, but you got to be able to say it specifically. So that goes up, all these things. And then finally, what might you be assuming that you don't have to assume? And that's hard because if you knew what it was, you wouldn't be assuming it. But if you get a group of people in the room, they'd say, well, maybe you're assuming this, maybe you're assuming that. And a lot of times that will unlock some really interesting facts. So that, in a good session, that might be 55, 60, or 70 facts in about a half-hour period. And then you start converging. You get people to start picking the ones that they think are the most important. or the most thought-provoking. We always say, how do we pick? Well, I say, listen, I could say the most important, yeah, but also the most thought-provoking, the most intriguing, things you didn't think about. Pick those, and everybody picks. So they all picking on their, with their own knowledge, and now we get the 55 or 60 down to about usually about 12 or 13, and then everybody says why they picked it and what they meant by it. Why did I pick it? So now I'm listening. Somebody else, you picked this one. Why did you pick it? Now you end up with some people pick the same one, three different people, but for three different reasons and three different meanings as to what it meant. So now you're spending, if you had an hour, now it's another half an hour, and you talk and you talk and you talk, and now you start agreeing on this fundamental few, and that's the telescoping method. So those are the questions, and we just know those questions work. I mean, where'd they come from? We found that they work, and so yeah, I did. I in my job at Mac, I had to write a paper or two every year, which I did, and the very first one I ever research I did was being at Procter and Gamble, a big experiment on, can you really teach people to be more creative? You're running around telling people, but could you run an experiment? I was lucky that I had a great teacher at the university who taught me how to do real research. And we, the Mahupani plant called and said, we'd like you to do some training in creativity. And I said, let's make a deal. Have you got a bunch of, we got 32 engineers in our, is there a chance of splitting them into two groups? Oh yeah, we could do that. So what I did an experiment where we randomly assigned the engineers into two groups of 16. And I thought about what's the question? What are you trying to come up with? And I said, it took me about 9 months to come up with the question, define the problem. What's the problem? And I said, in the facts, there's all kinds of people doing training and brainstorming and stuff like that. And there's all kinds of arguments about does it work or doesn't work in the real world, And there's also people saying groups will never work. You got to So I said, you know what? There's one piece of research. One guy said, I've tried to use this with managers, and basically they get it, but they can't use it in the real world. They just can't. There was another piece of research in 1960 by Cohen, Whitmire, and Funk, and they said they had 2 days with a hospital group of managers, and they found that they used their process on a real problem. It worked, and it didn't work on fake problems. So now I got two opposite things here. One says, yeah, well, the secret was this group did 2 days. 2 days. This guy did 1 hour. So I got it. If you provide training of high impact for long enough with a really good process, you've got a chance to get people brains from saying, I get it, I like it, and they buy into it, and they change their attitude. They actually change it. And if you don't get that, it'll never work. So you can't do training where you just put up 4 brainstorming rules and think something will work. But if you get people to say, I understand deferring judgment, I like it. I like this idea of diverging, I like it. Oh, I like converging, and they say, I like it. You've got the opportunity for a behavior change. So what I did was I trained 16 for 2.5 days, and we measured all kinds of behavior changes and things. And then the other group, I gave them a placebo. I gave them films and stuff like that.
Control
group. It worked. It worked. Yeah. So it worked. And I did this. So now the reason I was able to do is I had all the resources of Procter and Gamble beside me. I wasn't I had everybody helping me because they all were interested in this thing. And so I wrote probably the greatest dissertation anybody's ever done because I had the resources. My chairman, George Grain, when I left, he had every PhD student read my dissertation because it was such a classic. Whatever George taught me, I did it. George, did you do that? Yep, do that. George, yep. And I made up I had to make up my own measures. There were no measures for creativity. So I made up a whole bunch of measures, and they, and then we found that they were significant, whatever. So the reason I'm mentioning that is so that gave me confidence. Hey, I know what I'm doing, and I can say the Center for Research and Creativity, it does work. And so I don't know where I got off on that, but here's the thing that happened. Whenever you do research, you get unexpected results.
All right, folks, that's a good place to end part 1 of our chat with Dr. Min Basadur. You're going to want to listen in next time, the next episode, to see about these unexpected creativity results and how it launched the Basadur Profiler. You can learn more about Min and his work at basadur.com. That's Basadur.com. And that concludes this episode of the Product Quest Podcast. Let us know what your thoughts are at productquestpodcast@gmail.com, and we will see you next time.